This is Jim Semivan, and you are listening to That UFO Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. My name is Andy, and this is the listener call-in for August 2024, Part 2, a bumper episode with 4 calls on this one, folks. I've been speaking to many of you this month, and in this episode, the conversations range from a personal sighting that made the newspapers, general UFO chat you'd find down the pub, I'm talking, is disclosure a good or a bad thing, and what even is it, and a whole lot more. There are already another few calls recorded for another show, and I'd love to hear from some more of you when Luis Elizondo's book drops on August 20th. It's just a couple of days away. As I'm recording this, it's probably out by the time you're listening to it. Once you've read, listened, or even if you're not going to be reading Lou's book, I want to know your thoughts. This will be a special show for later in the month, so please drop me an email to the usual address, ufouapam@gmail.com. If the dodgy accent's not helping, the link for that is in the description, and we can arrange a time to talk. And once again, a very quick, huge thank you to everyone who either signed up on any of the paid platforms this month. Been incredible to see, and it really does make a massive difference to me. And also for anyone who is using this week's sponsors, as that always has a positive impact for me on the pod, and you get a great deal too. Check the descriptions for any of those deals. Anyway, folks, let's get on with this month's call-in Part 2. The listener call-in rolls on, and joining me on the line, I've got James in Florida. James, how are we?
Hey, I'm great, Andy. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. Good to have you on. And listen, you're on to talk about your own personal sighting, am I right?
That's right, yes.
Awesome. Listen, the floor is yours, James, so take it away.
All right, perfect. Well, to get started, I think I'm just going to do the same thing a lot of people do and, try to convince people that I'm not crazy to get going with. And just to give you a quick background about myself, I went to a well-known university. I have a degree in science. I'm not a PhD or anything like that, but I've always been a huge fan of science since I was a kid. My dad is an amateur pilot, and we're always around aviation and things like that. So very familiar with the sky and planes, and just what's up there in general. And I'm also say I'm a heavy materialist as well, which has made this pretty challenging in a lot of ways, just to try to um, rectify everything and bring it back to the realm of materialism, which I will struggle to do. As a forewarning to many people that are going to be listening, we're at least going to dip a big toe here into the woo, and I'm gonna try to bring it back. So stay with me. But some definite weirdness took place. So to start it off, I just first became interested in the topic. I had read an article by I forget who wrote it, but it was about the Nimitz incident, and I remember just being astounded that David Fravor's account and what he was saying. I'm thinking like, this guy's he can't be crazy. I mean, he had other witnesses on board, and this is just a really wild story.
Hmm.
And it kind of I tabled it for a bit after that, but eventually, I think it was around a year later, maybe like early 2021, that I was browsing. I think it was Prime Video for a documentary to watch, and everybody's going to cringe here, but the first one I found was Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind by Dr. Stephen Greer, which is a name many are probably familiar with. And I think in the first 5 minutes, I had to stop it. I was just like, whoa, this is like he just said like the 20th craziest things I've ever heard in my entire life in the first 5 minutes. This is absolute insanity. But I finished it out, and, we're going to take a lot of that, not at face value. But I became interested in what, he referred to as CE5. And, it sounds like an absolute insanity. And that's kind of what I thought at the time. But I looked more into it online, and I couldn't believe that there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people that were doing this and saying that it worked and it was a thing. So, being open-minded and just wanting to test the validity of things, I said, all right, I'll give it a try and I'll see what happens. So, um, with that in mind, I'd always been practicing mindfulness meditation. It's really helpful for managing anxiety and stress in the day-to-day life. And this time I gave it a try. I did the normal 10-minute mindfulness meditation. And I want to stress that during this time, I thought this was the craziest bullshit I'd ever attempted. And I told myself I'm never telling anybody this story, which obviously I'm going against that now, as I don't know how many thousands might hear this, but at least it'll help get the word out a little bit. Um, but I did my meditation, and after about 10 minutes, I did the outreach, and it was something as stupid as just saying in my head, hey, aliens, if you're out there, I want to talk to you. And it was an instant reaction. I was expecting absolutely nothing to happen. And right away, it felt like something was in the room with me. The best way I can describe it is if a invisible grizzly bear just walked in, and you can't see it, but you know something is there, and my adrenaline spiked, my fear spiked, and I had to stop the meditation immediately. And I couldn't see anything there, but there was just this overwhelming feeling of something in my apartment there with me. And I was so freaked out that, this is going to be comical, probably a little embarrassing for me to admit, but I was so freaked out that I grabbed a sword, which was a gift from an ex-girlfriend that I used to clear my entire apartment with, room by room, holding a sword in hand, which is the only weapon I have. And after a couple minutes of that, I kind of thought about what I was doing and how ridiculous this was, just kind of laughed it off. And I was like, all right, this is officially the dumbest thing I've ever done. I'm going to go ahead and just go back to work now and not think about this anymore. And I kind of put it aside. But a few hours later, it was that same night, I was there, just watching TV in the living room, and my blinds were mostly closed. But shining through my blinds at around 10 p.m., July 17th, 2021, it was the brightest thing I've ever seen in the sky. I've heard people describe it as stadium lighting, and I'd say that was the closest description I can come with. I've never seen a plane that bright. There were no navigation lights. I opened up the blinds and I see this. I guess you can call it a spherical object, but it was kind of hard to see any definition because it was so bright, and there was these extremely bright kind of rays coming off of it. If you were to like put like a cross pattern, think like the first aid kind of symbol, but just raised spikes coming off of this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was gliding right over the house, the rooftops, left to right. And I'm watching this thing, and I said those famous words, what the hell is that? And I'm watching it for a couple seconds, and I look to my left, and there is what I'm pretty sure was a C-130, and it was chasing this thing at a high rate of speed. Um, I tried to gather as much as I could at the time. My estimate is that, and I want to stress too, this was close. This was not a far away thing. This was under a mile away, maybe three-quarters of a mile. And it was moving at around 300 miles an hour is my estimate. And it was very low, under 2,000 feet in height. This is extraordinarily weird. So I do live somewhat close to an airport. I've never seen a flight path here. Certainly way too low, and it was over a residential neighborhood as well, which raises a lot of questions about, would the military be doing an exercise at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, uh, below, or maybe it was Friday, but yeah, right above these housetops.
Mm.
It just seemed like it would be such a hazard that they wouldn't do that. And if they were doing an exercise, what was this light thing that it was chasing? So I'm watching here astonished, and it looks like a dogfight. I see the plane, or rather, the light makes a hard bank left, not a 90-degree turn, but a really, really fast turn left and down. And I was astounded as the plane comes up and it does the same maneuver. It banks really hard left in what looked like a dogfight maneuver. And then both of them disappeared under the roof line that I could see. And I was worried. I was like, they were so low in a maneuver like that. I was like, this plane probably in danger of crashing. But I didn't see them anymore after that. And so I didn't really know what to think. I, went back to what I was doing, and um, about 10 minutes later, I I see out of my corner of my eye again, because now I'm actually looking. The blinds are more open,
Mm.
and I see these two orange, I guess, spherical objects kind of side by side, much higher in altitude, but still out there. And this was something I hadn't seen before. There were no other stars in the sky, and I was using the rooftop as a reference point to watch and see if they were dropping like you would expect a flare to. And they held their altitude, and they were there for, I don't know, a couple minutes. And finally it dawned on me. I said, maybe I should probably get a picture of this, because during this whole experience, it hadn't occurred to me yet to take a picture. And so I grabbed my phone and I, go out on the porch and I tried to get a picture of it. And I swear to God, as soon as I got my phone out to take a picture, both of them disappeared and I was not able to get a photo. Now, there is two things I want to touch on with both of these instances. Now, the first with the light, I see other people sometimes describe this, but there's this intuitive feeling of a connection, I guess you would call it, where I was looking at it, but I also knew that it was looking at me, and I knew that it knew that I knew that I was looking at it, and there was this kind of mutual, intuitive feeling that we both saw each other. And when the orange spherical, I guess orbs you would call them, showed up, it felt like I was a lot closer. I've heard there was a gentleman that came onto your show, maybe it was last year, talked about his triangle sighting, and he described something similarly, but it was like they were about 100 yards in front of me.
Hmm.
And I didn't hear voices or anything, but had this overwhelming intuitive feeling that what I was looking at was extraordinarily old, like millions and millions of years old. And it ended relatively fast. I couldn't tell you how long I was in that kind of state, but they disappeared, and I thought, kind of disappointed actually, that I thought, oh, maybe I saw some UFOs, but I'll never see anything like that again. Which wasn't the case, because over the next month or so, I'm probably not even going to go into any of the instances because I think they're potentially debunkable to the point where I would just sound crazy. But I did have some kind of weird things happen around the house. I guess one that was really strange, that I had all these flesh flies just start pouring into the window lock one day, which is so odd, like some kind of horror movie. And it was so random that I just didn't understand where that was coming from. Um, my dog also started to freak out at an invisible point inside my apartment, and she's barking, and I come out and she starts backing up like something's getting closer to her, and just barking like crazy, and she hasn't done this since, nor before. And it was like she felt something in the apartment, and I was watching and looking, and I stood in the exact point where she was barking at, and I swear to God, it was like a 15-degree temperature drop. It was like walking into a cave, is the best way to describe it. And so, those are just two somewhat strange things, I guess. I can kind of brush those off, but in October, I had this intuitive feeling to go out to the porch, and it was almost like this mental agreement not to take a picture. And I said, all right. And I went out to the porch, and, there was this very large yellow spherical object, maybe a few miles away, that was just kind of slowly pulsating on and off. And there was a smaller light that flew up towards it. Once it made contact with the yellow light, it shot off east in almost like a bullet. And at that point, the yellow light kind of disappeared as well. And super bizarre to have that feeling, go out to the porch, and then immediately just see that again. I can't explain that. But following that, maybe a few weeks later, I was out walking my dog again, and I look up and I see kind of and this was probably cruising altitude, you know, the classic triangle shape of three orange lights on the corners, and then there was actually a strobing bright white light on the bottom. No normal navigation lights, which I want to touch on too. None of this had any normal navigation lights by FAA standards. All of these things were illegal by far. But the thing with the triangle that was weird is that there was a different intuitive feeling about it. It felt like it was one of ours, but you could still kind of feel it. And I know this sounds nuts, but that's what happened. And it was also the fastest moving thing I've ever seen in the sky, besides the one I just described, where I took some quick calculations. I just kind of estimated how long I could see it. I mean, this thing, it cleared the horizon in about 9-10 seconds. And I went inside, and the next day I busted out, the old trigonometry, and to my own horror of having flashbacks of calculus class and everything else, I managed to get through it and calculate the speed of this at about Mach 3.1 was my estimate, which I looked up planes that can do that. There are a few planes out there that can fly at Mach 3.1. In the U.S. arsenal that's publicly available, there's nothing currently in rotation. A Russian MiG actually can do that, but I think if there was a Russian MiG flying over the United States, we probably would have had a more significant response than the nothing that I saw.
James, on that, because you're talking a lot about what you've saw, was there any sound accompanying these as well?
No, none of those had any sound at all. And that's a good question because where I live at, if a plane's flying overhead, even at cruising altitude, you would hear it. And sometimes it was loud enough to almost you have to raise your voice if you're having a conversation outside. And there was nothing at all to that.
Yeah. Okay.
So after that, everything just stopped suddenly. It was like a 3-month period where I had these really strange instances happen, and that was it. And since then, that was November 21 was the triangle. There were no sightings at all. And I had sent you a couple articles over, and I think they kind of flew under the radar a bit. But I was astounded when I saw in the paper, I think it was November of 22. I could be getting that wrong, but there was a near identical sighting, this time by a police officer that reported it to the local newspaper, and he even snapped a picture. And it was a C-130 chasing a UFO, which is the exact same thing that I had witnessed myself about 14, 15 months prior. And it felt good to see that. I was like, okay, I'm not the only one out there saying this. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at that article. And Officer Morose, if you're listening to this, I would love to talk to you. I'll provide an email address here once we wrap up. Anybody that wants to reach out to me, and not just Officer Morose, but happy to talk to anybody that might know more information or even some leads to go down. Because I think what happens to a lot of folks in this, once you see something, to the outsider, they're like, this guy has gone off the deep end. But we just start researching everything. I'm reading all kinds of books. I'm reading like Valet, and I love Michael Masters and all these guys, just trying to educate myself as much as possible, because prior to doing the CE5, frankly, I thought this was all total bullshit, and I didn't think it would even work. And then all these absolutely insane things happened in the time immediately following that. So I'll take a break there. I think I kept that to the half a Bassett or so. And
Yeah.
Any questions for me at all so far? And I'll probably dive into a couple other things if we have a few more
Yeah,
minutes.
definitely. Listen, I'll put the link in the description for folks who want to click on that and look at that article. You're spot on. It was November 5th that sighting happened with Officer Charles Morose. The pictures there looks tic-tacky. You've got the C-130, and that'll be in there for you, for anyone who wants to click on it. So thank you for sharing that, because that was really good, and you're speaking really clearly. So you should start a podcast. So couple of things taking you back to the start. Stephen Greer, it is what it is. He is an on-ramp for a lot of folks coming into this topic. And, I think it's like when you discover a new type of music and you find a band, and then you find some folks who like that band, and they say, oh, you don't want to listen to them. If you like this, listen to these. And you find other bands and you realize, that's the type of music you like, but here's the sound you like. And Stephen Greer isn't for everyone, but a lot of folks do like him and like his stuff. So, each to their own. And if it gets you into the UFO topic, then kind of wonderful. It's better to have folks finding all these different ways in, and then kind of finding their own way, which I think is always the best way. To remind folks who listen through that, obviously, James, your aviation knowledge is good because of your father's background, amateur pilot, your own interest in the topic, so you can tell roughly things at a height, what they sound like, what they look like, the basics of performance. You can tell all of those as well. Looking at the picture, which is interesting, and I'm no expert on photographic analysis, I do know that when I took a picture similar of an object like that in the sky, to be fair, it didn't have another aircraft for context, which is always handy. I know a few folks who looked at it and it looked like a Tic Tac to me. And they found when they managed to zoom in really close, they could just make out the wings. But that's with their own software and stuff. So the big difference here is, like your own sighting, the picture Charles Morose took, like I say, he's a Bradenton Beach police officer. He actually does say not only was there an object in the sky, he's saying it looks like it was moving 500 miles an hour. It shot off like a rocket towards the horizon. He says he's no UFO conspiracy theorist. He doesn't think it was from space or anything like that, but it was going incredibly quick, and it's not something he's used to seeing, given where he lives, where you live. You're used to kind of the skies being pretty busy. I wonder, you're saying it was a 3-month window where you had those kind of that intense period of sightings, some weird experiences that go on and can follow these things. Did you try like CE5 or anything like that since?
No,
Why not?
I I'm not convinced it's a good thing because from my own experience, it generated a reaction. And at least in my own life, I can't say things necessarily got better since then, and maybe it's the state of the world or wherever else. But I kind of want to know a little bit more about what we might be dealing with before doing such a thing. And I've heard things like, I think Tim Burchett, he thinks that they're demonic, and CE5 could be bringing in demonic presences. And obviously, we've all heard this demonic narrative quite a bit. And again, who knows? I don't know if that's the case. I'm open-minded. I'm not going to discount it because I don't have any evidence to discount it. But I think that I'd rather hear a little bit more from experienced people, kind of what those outcomes were before diving back into that realm again.
So pretty similar then to those who would say, like a Ouija board. They don't want to try these things. They don't know what they're opening up to, and letting in, and spirit realms and all those kind of things are kind of connected. So, I can sort of understand that. Has that sort of experience in time changed your thinking around the UFO topic?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it kind of catapulted me off the deep end there, just in terms of research and learning as much as humanly possible that I can about this. And if it wasn't for that, I doubt I ever would have. I was sort of interested, but when I saw a result happen from the experiment, I became extremely interested, and still very much am.
That's fair. Just to wrap up, because we've gone 20 minutes and it's been really interesting, I'd love to ask you one of the questions, James. I've been getting on to the members only content that will be coming in August. Do you want to pick a number, 1, 2, or 3?
I go one.
1. Okay, so your question, I'll put you on the spot with. What do you think that we, as ufologists, have to rethink to get further progress made in the UFO topic? It can be something public, political, whatever it is, something you think right now we're approaching the wrong way.
Question two. No, I'm just kidding. To rethink in this realm, I'm not even sure, Andy. What I think more than anything, we have to be kind. And I read the Reddits, the UFO subreddits, and Twitter and everything else. And I think that it is the most hostile place on the internet. Now, in my opinion, that is all not organic. I think there is intentional disinformation being put out there specifically to create conflict. And I think that we can at least overcome that or work through it just by being nice to each other. And if somebody disagrees with something, that's totally okay. In fact, that's better than everybody agreeing with each other, because disagreement is how we reach a consensus, and we're able to learn other perspectives, other angles, and can bring that
Mhm.
into our overall picture. So I don't know if that's necessarily answer the question directly, but I think that's what I would encourage everybody to do is be open-minded and kind.
No, it does answer the question, and I think it's one of the most difficult responses, because asking people to be kind online in 2024 seems far less likely than UFOs landing on the White House lawn. And James, do you know what? One more thing. Have you ordered, or are you going to be getting Luella Zondo's book that's due out in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I haven't ordered it yet. We'll see. I kind of want to see what everybody says about it first, but somewhere down the line, I'll probably end up getting it. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, listen, awesome speaking to you, James. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll grab the email address off you, and if anyone does want to get in touch, do you want to share that publicly, or did you want to just give that to me and I can pass it on to folks?
Oh, thanks for the reminder. No, let's just put it out there. I made a Proton account based on Ross Coulthart's recommendations. He always loves those, and it's called UFO Dogfight at proton.me.
UFO Dogfight at proton.me. that will be in the description for this show. Again, folks, you can click on that and get in touch with James if you want to know more or even share your own experiences.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, James. Thanks for calling in, man. Do so again.
Thank you.
And joining me on the line now, we go to New York, and I've got Dave. Dave, welcome back.
Hey, what's up, Andy? How are you?
I'm very well. Good to have you on. Early morning where you are.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, mid-afternoon where I am. But, people are going to listen to this in the future. There's going to be flying saucers over their heads. People have been living with the others for many years at this point. So this could be completely null and void, and they'll listen back as a historical record. But as we talk now in 2024, Dave, you've got something on your mind you want to talk about. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I was curious to hear your thoughts on the Nazca mummies. I know that was like it was a big thing. I feel like it was the end of last year, right? Where, the Mexican government, they had that big presentation. Ryan Graves was there, and he felt like he kind of got hijacked from what he wanted to talk about. And all of a sudden, Hussein came on, and he was just like, "Hey, look at these mummies." Everybody kind of freaked out about them for a minute. And what's interesting is that I found that, to me at least, it felt like a lot of that initial reaction was kind of negative, right? Like I just saw so many people posting like, "This is garbage. These are a bunch of paper mache, mummies that are, made with like other animal parts," right? Tons and tons of backlash from him, utilizing that platform to introduce those mummies. And what's interesting is over time, and let me know if you feel the same, but I feel like the direction and the vibe of that conversation that's still going on is now kind of changed a bit. And now I'm feeling and seeing more people kind of come out and being like, well, there seems like there's evidence to suggest that these things are real, that they're not made out of like fake animal parts, which I think is a thing that's been common with fakes of this kind. And I'm just curious to know, what happened? How is it that this conversation continued to sustain itself and now is again kind of moved back in this direction, to making it feel like there's some validity to this whole topic.
Yeah, it's a really funny one, isn't it? Because you're right, it was later last year, like September, I think it was. Those hearings, I'm pretty sure it was September, happened in Mexico. And like you say, Ryan Graves was there. The mummy got wheeled out later on as a bit of a surprise. And it certainly was a surprise. I was traveling that morning somewhere on train, and I can't remember why. And I remember it was really early morning, literally sitting having a coffee, open my phone, jump on Twitter, and it was just like notifications everywhere and people saying disclosure happened. And I got messages from some folks like, "Can't believe this happened, Mexico," and what? And you're kind of waking up, and then you see like Jaime Maussan, connected to it, and it was a bit strange. And I think early on it was poo-pooed because of the way it was done and everything like that.
Yeah.
I will still stand by, before I give my thoughts, the story has been hard to follow. For me, I won't say that for everyone. For me, as someone who doesn't speak Spanish, where a lot, I think, the story has been told, and there's a huge Spanish speaking population worldwide, so if they're on it, they're on it. So for me, that's been a difficulty going through it, as I've found some of it hard to follow, not just from a language point of view, but from a point of view of the folks involved and how they've chosen to present this. We had the canopy in LA, and the Wi-Fi kept going down, the signal kept dropping out. There was people watching it on multiple feeds. One of the fingers broke on one of the skeletons, and you're like, it just looks so amateur. And if you think back to other incidents like that, where we had Anjali, remember, came forward for a while a couple of years back, and basically she done her speech in front of, was it the Washington Monument or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
But she was outside in a chair covered in blankets. And it was like, again, what are the optics of that situation? You know, the message does get lost within how things look.
Yeah.
And I think this was the big issue for me. And I suppose a few months ago, the story hadn't gone away. I, for a long time, had been quite stubborn to say there's nothing to this. Like you say, it's fakes, frauds, must be a hoax. I would love it to be real, love it to be genuine, but I've seen nothing so far. Quite a lot of listeners got in touch with me about this to say you really should look into it a bit further, you know, do a bit more digging. And that was fair. I hadn't done my research properly. I had made a snap judgment, which we all do. Once I looked into it a little bit more and got past those initial names and tried to dig into some Reddit forums, some articles, and found other people's links and snippets and folks saying, here's something good to look at. Like you, I started to go, maybe there's something a little more to this. Not to just be dismissed immediately. Then I saw like Stephen Brown, who I got on, William Gallison. I'd been put in touch with those from a few listeners, and they spoke really well about it. And they gave the argument, you know, there's just something worth looking at here. We need to do the science. And I think that was something on the breakdowns, like Dan was always keen on as well, to say, you know, with this kind of stuff, you have to take it with a pinch of salt until the science says one way or another. And I think a lot of us, like yourself, it sounds like have got to the point where there might be something there. We have to let the scientists work. That then comes with the issues around transparency, because many of the scientists allegedly don't want to come out and be named, which you can understand given what they're doing.
Right.
100%, yep. And it seems there is work ongoing on multiple of these beings. Where I'm at right now and what I'm kind of hearing are some of them they believe aren't real for whatever reason, particularly the smaller ones potentially.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, go on.
But I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to mummies, because I know that it's not a new thing, right? But what was interesting is that I learned later that they are, they're running tests on these mummies, but there are other mummies, right? They're the ones that were presented right last year, which were like these tiny little guys in those in those small boxes. But then there are larger ones that are, I mean, they
5,
look like
6
they're
feet,
size of like a normal human.
Yeah.
And so I think for me at least, kind of going back to something you mentioned, it's been difficult to kind of understand what's going on. Like, well, which mummies are being, are they testing? What happened to those ones from Mexico last year? Are they being further looked into? Have they been debunked? So yeah, but sorry, just thought that was interesting.
That's it. You're totally right, and those bigger ones seem to be the focus for further study and genuine curiosity, I think, from some of the folks involved. When I had Stephen Brown on the first time, he went over really well with the audience. People loved him, and he was quite open-minded as a philosopher, saying he's not a scientist, but the folks he's working with, the people involved with it, he's seen enough to think there's something to it, that they could be ET. But then when I got him back on 6 weeks later or something like that, he's gone back on that and thinks perhaps not ET, but he thinks there's some kind of hybridization gone on several thousand years ago. So he's not saying they're alien, but he's saying something really weird genetically has happened to these bodies a period of time ago that we didn't have that sort of technology or capability, which could still indicate some kind of non-human interference. It would have to. So for me, I'm at the point of there might be something there. It could be that they are genuinely ancient artifacts with some kind of alterations, either technologically or biologically. I'm not sure, but I think there's something worth looking at there, and I hope we get results from it. And if that means it's going to take a while, because I think people like myself, I'm a complete ignorant, layman on science. So for me, it's like, why can't a scientist just walk in and take a sample, put it under a microscope and go,
right.
Alien.
Right.
When you get genuine scientists on, they they shiver at that, I'm sure, to go, no, that's not how these things work, and things take time and money and labs and funding, and
Right.
you have to study something and then get results and then go back and get further results, and all that can take months and months and months. So I think it does need time. There may be something to it. I'm still on the fence, but leaning slightly towards they're not alien ET, but my foot's still hanging over the other side of the fence, going, nah, don't just leave it quite yet, and let's see what happens. What about you?
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm in the same. I had that knee jerk reaction, which was like, oh, this looks ridiculous. It seems fake. It seems like people are just using this as a way to get some attention. Uh, but those who are a little bit more in the know seem to think that there is something there, including yourself. So, I feel like it was a good test for me to remind myself, like, hey, like, be open minded, right? Like, this is the whole reason why you're interested in this subject matter to begin with, why you, kind of talk about it amongst your friends and your family. Just be open minded. I think that's it. And I'd love to hear more about what's going on with the testing that's being done. And I mean, I'm also very curious to know, like, because you kind of pointed out, like, this is something that could take time, right? It's going to take time to look into these beings and do more research. I'd love to know, like, is that like a year from now? Like,
Yeah.
when somebody might be able to say definitively, like, this is not a human being, and it's not made up of you know random animal parts.
Mm-hmm.
It is something else. There's something there, and we're not quite sure what it is. Like, I would love to know when we get sort of that critical mass, from the
Yeah.
scientific community, right? Where it's more than just like one doctor, one researcher, or a few that can come out collectively and say, like, this is something. And so far, like, I haven't heard that. Like, a lot of the articles and things, and that I read and pick up over Twitter, there's just there's no real. It just doesn't feel like there's enough information there for me, outside of like the fantastical. Oh, it's mummies. Look at like, read this article about mummies, and get some views. Beyond that, I'd love to actually hear from somebody who's like representing a team, or you know what I mean, or like working in
Yeah.
conjunction with other scientists to say, like, we're on this, we got this, and give us a year, something like that, and we'll be able to get back to you, because we feel like we've got enough support and enough equipment, enough time, to be able to do that for the general public.
And I think you've kind of nailed a little bit of the issue there, that it's still very fragmented. If someone said to you right now, where are the bodies? I don't know where they are. I don't know who's got them. I don't know who's got bits of what. The teams working on these different samples are pretty split up as well, it sounds like. I don't think it's as easy to get the samples people want as well. I know I listened to Howard Hughes many months ago in the UK, and he had Jaime Maussan on his show. And Jaime Maussan offered to fly scientists from the UK or academics who had interest out there and get samples and whatnot. I've heard to the contrary, though, that that's not as easy for folks to take up as Jaime made it sound. So, it's one of those, it's the age old, it's the UFO story in a nutshell, isn't it? Where
Right.
something's there, the carrot's dangling on the stick right in front of us, but it's really difficult to get to the carrot. Really difficult. Dave, before you go, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to be recording some members only content soon, and there's 3 questions. We'll be discussing people's answers. So, if you can pick a number 1, 2, or 3 for me, please.
Level of interest.
No, just pick a number 1, 2, 3.
3.
3. Okay. So, the question I'm going to ask you that you have to answer right now is, what one question, if you could have answered right now about the whole UFO phenomenon, would you want to know the answer to?
Oh man, Andy, you can't put me on the spot, man. And it's just one. That's It's torture.
The burning question that you will get the 100% genuine truth answer to,
Hmm.
but no follow-up.
Hmm. I'd have to think on that one, Andy. Honestly, I'm terrible with
Dave,
on the
you're in a room with Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and a guy in a black, suit smoking in the corner in the shadows, and they say, "Okay, we've got this big file in front of us. What do you want to know?"
Well, I mean, I would like, are they real? But I feel like we already know the answer to that question. But you know what? I'd say, are they real? Because while I feel very confident that I know the answer is yes, that there's something out there, there's an intelligence out there. I want the general public to have that answer. You know what I mean? Like the
Sure.
people who are not like you or me, who are reading books and following the stuff on the day to day. I would want them to just know that that's real. That it is a thing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's disclosure, right? At least to some extent. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Awesome. Dave, lovely speaking with you again. Well done on making what I believe is your second appearance on the call-in. So next time when I've got one on, it'll be good to get you back on.
This is awesome, Andy. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was great talking with you again.
Cheers, Dave. Anytime.
Cool. Thanks, Andy. Take care, everybody.
This is an ad for HelloFresh. I think for many of you out there I hear from, you're busy, time is precious, and you don't always get time to listen to podcasts like this when you're relaxing. You've got stuff to do. So with summer in the rearview mirror, unfortunately for many of us, and the darker nights on the horizon, it's the perfect time for you to save some cash and precious time when it comes to dinner time. No more meal planning, huge grocery store lines, and seeing how much food you've wasted over the week, and I hate that when you open the bin. That's all a thing of the past with HelloFresh's convenient doorstep delivery and pre-measured ingredients. Everything you need is there in the box for you. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Even the best intentions over the week go out the window, folks. As your plans change, things come at you fast. That's why even once you're signed up, you can customise your delivery from HelloFresh week to week. Or if you're off visiting some friends, maybe at a UFO conference for a few days and you're not going to be home, you can arrange to skip a week. Easy as that. Listen, it's high quality food, folks, taking all the hassle out of cooking for you. I've been speaking to friends in the States. Just being able to have high quality food catered to their dietary needs with any specific requirements being taken care of has been a huge, huge plus for them. And how about this? For free breakfast for life, go to hellofresh.com/free thatUFO. One free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to hellofresh.com/free thatUFO. Okay, so next on the line we head to Minnesota, and long-time listener Christian, welcome you on the listener call-in. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Andy. How are you?
I'm well, and it's good to have you on, and thank you because we've spoken quite a lot, via email, back and forward over the times, haven't we? And yeah, it's good to finally speak to you.
Yeah, man. Same here. I've always admired your rationality and your the way you handle things about this topic. It's kind of impressive, honestly, because I think you got to be balanced, and it's not easy to be balanced with this issue sometimes. You got to be careful
Yeah.
of rabbit holes and all that stuff. So, yeah.
No, thank
cheers,
you. I appreciate that. So listen, the floor is yours. So this is about you. What is it you want to talk about?
Well, I guess I don't really want to talk about my story that much because I always get kind of when people tell me their stories. First, I believe people. Like I think this is a topic. People always say, it could be you could be making something up or whatever. For me, this is almost embarrassing to talk about. It's not like it's cool. So when people talk to me about that, like I tend to believe them. I want to talk about the issue of how this affects humanity. If disclosure, that's what everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
Is it good? Is it bad? Is it worth it? Right? Is it? And from a government point of view, if I was president of the United States, what would I do? I mean, that doesn't. A lot of people, I would disclose. But if you are president of the United States, you have to kind of keep your wants and needs and think about everybody, right?
Hmm.
Every citizen in the United States, or in the whatever, and think how it'll affect them. And I don't know what the truth is. So the truth could be bad news or it could be good news. I don't think it's good news because, I mean, I don't know. I think there's both, right? I think there's a lot of things going on, but I do think that there's been a lot of things that have happened in history with this topic that even if the phenomena is good news, what the United States what the government has been doing hasn't been good. And I don't know how you tell that to the people. A lot of people want revenge, and I do too, especially like I'm a big fan of like the Elizondo, David Grush, Carl Nell, all these guys, Christopher Mellon, even Tom DeLonge. I think he deserves a lot more respect than what he gets personally. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a big fan of these guys because I see them as, I don't want to say heroes. That sounds too. Fuck that. Sorry for cursing. But that's yeah, okay. I see them as, like they put themselves out there, they risked everything, and to me that's heroic, right?
Yeah.
And they did it in the right way where they weren't like telling all like classified information. So, I guess if I had a goal, I wish the stigma could die. Like I wish people wouldn't have to be ridiculed. I wish people could, that struggle with this could get help. And, like if I go to a therapist or a shrink and tell them I have all this crazy stuff, like I'll probably get labeled as schizophrenic or something, yeah. Right? Or not me personally, but I do know a lot of people that have experiences, and I wish that could end personally. But yeah, I think it's a complicated topic, man. It's complex, and I try to find solutions for it in my mind, and I'm struggling. I mean, there's some people out there, free energy would save the world, but, let's get the military-industrial complex. Let's bring them down. But it's not. So what? How are we going to do that? Like, and what then? Like, if like, do you want to bring America down, and then you bought Russia and China? They're just not. I try to put myself in both positions of the people and if I was president, which is hard to do. It sounds like a nightmare, honestly. If I was president dealing with this issue, that would be a tough one. I think I would want to see where people are at, like put a ballot there, like, do you want disclosure? Warning, things could get weird if you say yes, and see what the population says, kind of thing, or something like that. But I don't know how I would deal with it. It's because it's complicated. I don't know what your take on that is, or if you're interested in chiming in. But
yeah. No, I've wrote down a few things, man. So the first thing is right at the start. You said, is it good? Is it bad? But for you, what is it? What is disclosure? So what would be good? What could be bad? What actually is disclosure for you? What's being disclosed?
I already got it personally. Like I think I got it back when David Grush was talking on the hearing in that hearing. For me, that was disclosed. I almost got it like in February 2023. I remember, if you remember those shoot downs, I was kind of skeptical and I didn't understand it first. But I looked more into it, and there seems to be something weird, with those other three specifically. I don't know much details, but just rumors, but it was strange how they handled that. And then I remember seeing John Kirby talking, the phenomenon is real and it's affecting our military exercise and it's worldwide. He said that, John Kirby, and the president of the United States comes in and he's like, we're making the UAP interagency office. What happened to that, Mm-hmm. And then he runs away from the podium. And I don't know. To me, I feel like I already got it. Honestly, I don't expect much more from the government, and I think I'm at peace where that's at. Because if I cringe emotionally, I want more and more and more, and I'll go nuts, And I don't expect, unless this is another concern of mine, which I don't know because it's a lot of rumors. I never take dates seriously. People say 2026, 2027, 2030. Never take them seriously because it never happens, right? But I don't know if you saw Luis Elizondo. He retweeted something about his book yesterday. And the first sentence was, and like I said, I'm a fan of Lou and I take him very seriously. The first sentence was, I forgot what it says. It's like humanity is about to be, put through something that it's never went through before, or something like that. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Humanity's approaching a moment that nothing. That one.
Yeah, that one exactly. Like.
So I'll tell you what. I'll read it, okay? Because I've just got it. Humanity is approaching a moment that nothing in our evolution has prepared us for. That's the quote.
Exactly. What does that mean? So should I be concerned, in other words, right? And then you hear Carl Nell talking about the Bronze Age, and I don't know if you know anything, about that, but, there's like this sea people that came out of nowhere and wiped out a bunch of people. I don't know. It's like, what's going on here? Then Jim Semivan tells James Landoli, in the end of his podcast, I don't remember, it was something like, something coming soon, and I'm like, well, okay, so hold on, like, should I actually be concerned? Because I know people are like, catastrophic disclosure, let's go. I got kids, bro. Like, I don't want catastrophic. I don't want to deal with aliens invading us. You know what I mean? Like, I actually hope that's not true. You know what I mean? Because I got children, man. So should I be worried? Or not,
on that, let me come back on that one, Christian, because I interviewed Danny Sheehan just like 24 hours ago, and I've not even put that out yet for people who pay for it and stuff. It's going to be out by the time this comes out. But I asked Danny Sheehan about that catastrophic disclosure, because I think so many people mix up what it means, that there's going to be a catastrophe attached to disclosure. That is that, like you say, some kind of invasion or impending doom, or aliens turn up and enslave us all, something like that. Danny felt it was more along the lines of, because I asked him, from the people who know, that he's not NDA'd, so he has to kind of piece this together himself, but he sees it more in the form of energy companies having issues with stock prices. There was a couple of things, and I can't even remember what the other thing was, but it wasn't necessarily a catastrophe in terms of humanity collapsing, but some of our power structures having major issues, like world governments, militaries, that kind of stuff, where all of a sudden what we're used to in terms of society, I suppose we saw maybe a little bit of it with COVID, and that we're having trouble in the UK right now with a lot of riots and protests, whatever people want to call them, depending on what side of the fence you're on. Kind of societal collapse a little bit. You're seeing it in the US with a huge split between the Democrats and the Republicans, especially with the whole cult of personality behind the candidates. I think you're probably looking at that, but on a more extreme level. Because if, for example, if you take that over the course of a few days and weeks and months, that petrol becomes worthless, because all of a sudden, do we need it anymore? I think we do, because I think I've talked about this before, Christian, that overnight we're not all getting free energy and free cars. That's not going to happen. That would be monetized. You would still buy a vehicle, maybe with a lifetime battery, but you would still pay for that. You would have a subscription service to pay for that battery. You couldn't make it yourself. Aliens aren't coming down and handing out little cubes that give everyone unlimited free energy. It wouldn't happen that way. I think that's a kind of blue sky thinking. But I think in terms of catastrophic disclosure, it's more the catastrophe that it's taken out the hands of the people in power. That's the catastrophe, and less so for us. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. But I ask you, is it connected to the phenomena in some sense? Or is it not? Or is it just... because there's a lot of weird things going on lately, like with... I've been paying a lot of attention to planes crashing and there's a lot of military planes crashing and even civilians. And I wonder, what's going on with Boeing? Like, there's two whistleblowers that have mysteriously committed, suicide, and then Luis Elizondo raises the flag that he's worried about his life, and I wonder. And then an F-35, did this guy ejects? like randomly, like what? Like I don't know. I'm not saying that's connected to UAP. I'm just saying, like things are kind of weird right now, and they don't. I don't know. Like it seems like a lot of people are having problems, including NASA. They got two astronauts. I'm going all over the place.
Yeah, that NASA thing's connected to Boeing as well, because it's their craft, isn't it, that's got stuck. And these astronauts that were told they would be there for 8 days are now going to be there till after Christmas.
That's terrible, man. That's terrible.
But I know what you mean, but I wonder sometimes with all that news, is this anything that hasn't always, and I don't mean just the UFO topic, but news in general, this level of news has always gone on. This level of events has always happened somewhere, sometime on the planet. What we have now is we all have access to all of the news all of the time. And I think
That's
even
true.
citizen journalism now is taking over. So people are following random individuals on Twitter for specific news items. People are following football and soccer fans to get their team news rather than the team or the traditional sports journalists. People are tuning into podcasts like this to find out about UFOs, rather than going and finding the big documentary makers or your mainstream news shows or alternative news shows, because normal people are picking up these mantles and running with it themselves. So I think an element of it is we have access to everything all the time. And just going through my Twitter feed the last few days, if I just use the UK unrest we've got just now, my UFO Twitter feed, which I literally only pretty much follow UFO stuff, is flooded with people retweeting both sides of the argument. So it's really pick your poison as to what you want to believe at times as well. And that makes it really difficult to follow what's going on. So then if you bring that into the UFO topic, you just have to look at the names on both sides of a fence, which is interesting, speaking to a Danny Sheehan, because he's on the Greer side and the Elizondo side. So, and he's involved with so many people. And I think this happens, and I've spoken about this before on the podcast with Dan and stuff and others, that I think if someone can be so involved in so many different camps of the UFO topic, you do pick up bits of stories, and then what is true, what's hearsay, what speculation bleeds over into, actually, that speculation I heard does tie in with this genuine event I know happened. And over time, those memories kind of bleed into each other. So even the most intelligent, well-rounded folks involved in this topic can start to conflate or misconstrue information. It doesn't always mean they're lying. No one in this topic's infallible, and I think that's a mistake a lot of folks make, that no matter, and to use the two extremes of Elizondo or Greer, they're not always wrong and they're not always right. People have to understand that, and that isn't always malicious.
100%, and that's why I commended you at first when I said that you're careful with your rabbit holes, you're able to stay balanced, and I try to do that as well. I don't want to go crazy, and one can go down the rabbit hole, and then next thing you know, I don't know, like your life changes for the worse. But I agree with everything you just said. And I don't think, when I talk about catastrophic disclosure, I don't really think aliens are going to invade. They've been here for, I believe since at least the nuclear age, something's been going on. And it seems like they're always just underneath that line, right? Like just right under the line your average Joe can ignore this topic. It affects a small amount of people, which sucks because it's like, I feel like these people are like collateral damage. They get, ridiculed or whatever, but it stays right underneath that line where your average Joe can just, and that's fine. People got to work, they got to pay their bills, and like this topic is not easy. So I kind of understand why people don't want to learn about this. Some people also could find it disturbing.
Do you know?
So I don't think
you mentioned, Christian, that level of the phenomenon's always there, just underneath. So last week I had my little boy in like an arcade with me, and he loves playing on this game where you shoot dinosaurs on the screen, or little zombie things, depending on what one it is, but it shoots water out of a cannon, and you shoot the screen and it, connects. But he's only 3, so he really struggles to aim the cannon at the right part of the screen. So without him knowing, I literally sit with my finger underneath the gun, and I tilt it ever so slightly to make sure he's trying to be more accurate. He has no idea I'm doing that, but he thinks he's in more control of it than he is. But I'm manipulating that gun without him seeing. So I wonder, is that the level sometimes this phenomenon, whatever it is, or an aspect of it has over us, where it's just out of sight, it's manipulating things, but we just don't quite see it because maybe it is so subtle.
Right, exactly. I agree. And by the way, it's funny you say that. My son's 3 years old, and we play the same thing,
Yeah,
and I do the same exact same
yeah,
thing
you
that
have
you
to.
do. You have to, exactly. But yeah, I think something like that's going on for sure. And I want to ask, what's disclosure mean for you, if that's okay? Because I'm interested.
I think at this point it's an official confirmation that there's a non-human intelligence that governments are aware of. Not that
Right.
I don't need to be convinced that there's something out there. I've said before, if I use the extreme that you mention all the folks that you find are heroes, so Nell, Grush, Elizondo, Mellon, etc. If I found out tomorrow they were all bullshitting, all a big psyop, and it was all nonsense for black budget military funding, okay? I wouldn't walk away from the UFO topic because I've had a couple of sightings. I've read so much, I've seen so much, I've watched so much that there's something to this topic which isn't human. So I don't need that validation. I know some people do, but I think for the general populace, you do need that official government, we're not alone, essentially, whatever that means. And for me, I think still the most likely way that comes anytime soon is that James Webb picks up something, the telescope, and you get a confirmation that we've found life on another planet that's so far away we can't get to it for 100 years. And that'll be just enough to get the conversation started to really ramp up a proper disclosure to the public that eventually, yes, well, something might be coming here already. So I think that's still where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of already happening. I think they've been finding a bunch of planets, exoplanets, and it's interesting. And I think that's how it's going to start. Now, will we ever get to like a capital D? A lot of people want capital D. I don't see that right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially with everything that's going on in the world, man. There's I was a lot more excited in 2021 with the UAP task force and all that, and then like once I don't know, in 2022, you started getting like the war in Ukraine, and now the politics, and then there's more wars, and I'm like, how the hell is like, how are we gonna bring this? Like how and it's interesting actually that Rounds is still putting legislation and all that, but I don't know, where will it be, but I do think we'll learn more as we go. Like I said, a capital D, unless it's like an emergency, like something is
Mm-hmm.
coming or something like that we're talking about. I don't see it. I just don't. That's me personally. But yeah, man. Hey, Andy, I gotta get back to work. I would talk to you all day if I could, man. But I'm at break at work,
No,
so
listen, totally appreciate it, Christian. And again, thank you for supporting and listening and getting in touch. Definitely come back on for the next one, okay?
sounds good, man. Take care.
We're going to move on the podcast now to Anthony in mid Wales. Anthony, how are we?
I'm very good, sir. I'm very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to come on. I mean, I should say from the start that listening to the previous call-ins and how erudite the people who come on are, and sometimes it feels as if you're listening to a lecture in a wonderful university hall. This is very much going to be the opposite to that, and more listening to two guys in a pub at about 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. So, feel free to sort of skip ahead if that's not your thing. But
Oh, don't
hopefully it
skip
might be
ahead.
something.
That'll ruin my stats, folks. Don't skip ahead,
Don't skip
definitely.
ahead. This is going to be really, really smart stuff, honest.
Yeah. No, listen, that suits me. And do you know what, mate? You're quite right that the callers are all very different, but there are so many who come on and can speak for like 20 minutes. In a way, I think I would struggle so clearly and concisely. And yeah, I'm always really impressed. And sometimes we get folk like yourself just coming on to ramble. So listen, the floor is yours, though, mate. So take it away.
Well, I was trying to think last night of what the sort of best subjects, and I thought, should I be sort of really super clever and give my ideas about why I think disclosure can't happen and things like that. And then I listened to one of your previous calls, and I can't remember if it was yourself or maybe one of the contributors. We're talking about the mind shift in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, almost the rebranding of the subject of UFOs. And there's sort of an old school mentality, and some people don't really want to be involved with the new stuff. And I kind
Mhm.
of thought, oh my God, that is me actually. That is
Yeah,
me.
that was me. Yeah, I said that. Yep.
And that's exactly sort of how I feel. I mean, sort of, no, give me sort of Roswell, the Glocker, Devil's Den, sort of Rendlesham. That is the type of stuff that I sort of really get my teeth into and I really enjoy. I think, thinking about it today, if you were into the subject in sort of the mid 90s, late 90s, and then you sort of closed the book on it and just thought, right, I'm going to ignore the subject for the next 20 years. And then in 2024, you wake up one morning, crack your knuckles, and go, right, I'm going to get involved with this UFO stuff now. Let's see how this
Mhm.
has gone on. And then you look at it and you kind of think, hang on a minute, right? We've had hearings. Oh, but those hearings would have been done by just some weird yokel. No, no, no. They were done by a highly decorated defense guy. And you're like thinking, well, surely this is like the biggest news in the world now. Yeah, it was for about 24 hours, and then the press moved on. Oh,
Yep.
right, okay. Right. What about all this other stuff? Oh, yeah. Well, we've got books coming out. The guy who knows that's been billed that he's going to know everything about the UFO subject. Oh, great! Oh, that's going to be fantastic. Yeah, he used to run this one. He used to run this this one project within the Pentagon. Oh wow, this is going to be amazing. Oh yeah, and then there's another guy who sort of owned like a spooky court field out in the middle of nowhere, and yeah, he's sort of part of it as well. But this all kind of comes under the umbrella of the lead singer out of Blink 182. You know, we'll be thinking, what the hell's going on? What do you mean all of this? You know,
Yeah.
what? You'll be going back to sort of Gary McKillen and kind of going, no, I think I prefer the old Nazis on the moon and stuff. But it's, I find it difficult now to sort of, I'm like everyone else, I'm really excited about Lou's book. I cannot wait for it to come out. But I do have this sort of feeling as if this rebranding of the subject was on purpose, that will take the sort of focus away from the stuff that we all sort of grew up with. Maybe the stuff wasn't that we was never meant to sort of find out about. And maybe the only stuff that we really will sort of find out about it is going to be from UAP moving forward. I mean, even the term UFO now has kind of gone away. You know, people say, "Oh, what about the aliens?" Oh, we don't really call them aliens anymore. And it's like, oh, really? It's it, the whole focus seems to have shifted, and I find that quite a strange thing to sort of happen to a subject that was so sort of deep rooted in its history, and now all it is focused on is the future moving forward, and I find that quite odd, and I'm really sort of wondering what your sort of idea was about it.
No, I'm glad you said that, because it backs up one, that I wasn't just making that up when I said so, that there are so many people who get in touch with me to say that their interest in this topic is of what happened 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. And maybe they've got an interest. I think you've got to have some kind of, interest. I know as guys like Grush and Elizondo and whatnot, but there are lots of folk who don't need the government to disclose. They don't need, permission to believe in the subject as they would see it. That's the way some people word it. And they enjoy the history of the topic, the experiences, the well documented cases, because for them, that is all the evidence they'll ever require. So, and there's maybe a distrust of the government, because you're now relying on the government's a big thing, but you're relying on the entity that's always been the bad guy to now give you the good news. And how can you trust that when you've got 80 years of cover up and disinformation and shadows and secrecy, and all of a sudden, actually, some of those folk were okay. It's a big twist for a lot of folks. So there's definitely that. I wonder. I made a note before, but when you talk about the public and where they're at with the topic and a rebranding, is there a chance, and I'm not sure, I'm asking you, Anthony, that the public's ready for that big next step then, and that we don't need to rebrand and have the same conversation we've had before with a different name? But is the public generally in a place where, okay, it's time to confirm we've found something or something's here?
I'd almost see it in a little bit more of a cynical way, where I sort of feel that we're at a point in which so many people don't necessarily believe what their government is telling them,
Hmm.
don't believe mainstream media. They sort of their news feeds are sort of echo chambers on social media,
Yeah.
and so therefore, um, the powers that be, whoever that might be, is now thinking, well, do you know what? Let these books come out. Let these kind of things come out, because ultimately it's not moving the dial. I can see on the on the side there you've got Ross Coulthard's book, and I've been listening to In Plain Sight again recently, and you sort of think, this is some of this stuff in here is sort of groundbreaking. This isn't by just a guy who, a UFO guy that's been sort of going on the circuit for years and years. This is a proper journalist that didn't have his roots in UFOs, and he's gone away, he's done his research, and he's come out with this stuff, and it's groundbreaking. Some of it for us it's groundbreaking, but I read it to my wife and she just shrugs and goes, oh really? And I sort of feel as if we're going to get the same type of thing. It's going to be great, we're going to love Lou's book, but I know at sort of 1 a.m. on the 20th, when it gets released and I put my AirPods in bed and I start listening, and then I shake her awake and go, Lou Elizondo was a remote viewer, and she'll look at me and go, I don't know who or what that is, go to
Yep.
sleep. And she won't care, but we'll be talking about it for the next 6 weeks after.
Hmm.
And I whether or not that people feel as if we're ready to sort of move on to sort of other aspects of and learn more about this phenomenon, I sort of see it in the other way, in which they are allowing this information to come out because they know that it just washes over people nowadays so quickly. Eh, we go back on, it's just over a year now since we had those hearings, and that that should have just broken it into bits.
Hmm.
That it shouldn't have stopped, but then it just kind of falls back. Other things take over. Of course, there's things that are happening now and have happened in the past 12 months that, should overtake, the subjects that we enjoy. But at the same time, I find it bonkers that these, people in the people who are fighter pilots who the world trusts talks about his interaction with a craft or an object in which he is certain didn't come from this world and wasn't made by humans, and everybody sort of nods and goes, "Oh right, okay, okay, that's fine,
Yep.
right." You know, what's happening next? And it was on the front page of, you know, uh, I'm sure it was on the front page for a lot of American papers. We don't get a lot of American news other than the sort of the presidential stuff. We don't get a lot of
Yep.
American news, but it was on the front pages of our newspapers as well, in Britain. And yeah, it only took 72 hours for sort of that tide just to roll back into the sea, and yeah, and it sort of goes away. And that's why I feel as if we're now being allowed to sort of have books like Lou's book coming out, James Fox's documentary that we think is going to be along the lines of projects that have happened. And
Hmm.
this information previously was probably always going to be stopped, and we were never going to find out. And we can find out now because they feel as if the main majority of the population is not going to engage in it or be too concerned about it. I do think one area will always move the dial, which I think is religion. I think as soon as the a religious aspect sort of comes out, I do think that is what people might be more concerned about them. But in general view is yeah no I love the optimistic idea that it's because we are now sort of ascending to maybe a higher level of understanding, and that we sort of grown as a species, that we can now sort of understand this stuff. But um yeah, I have a horrible feeling it's going to be more of the fact that they think that we've just become more docile, and we'll, we'll just be scrolling through to the next story on our news feeds.
Yeah, do you know what, mate? You've put that really well. It's not. It's literally. It is because of something you said. It's not because we're ready to ascend and all that kind of stuff and a higher level of understanding. Because the society's in the shit heap. Things aren't looking good. And if you were in a higher intelligent species looking down right now on the state of the UK, the state of the US, just to name, the two biggest listener populations, everyone else is, I'm sure, doing fine. Um, we're not in a good way in the UK just now. We're a mess. Um, I was told to work from home yesterday from my work because of potential riots in the city centre, which has never happened before. I won't go into details on that, but I think it's more a case that people are ready because, like you say, we're so blasé and dumb and numb to all the news cycles now that maybe people are just ready for. Remember the meme during COVID that where it was up next is the aliens, and it was like they were waiting behind the curtain to come out. I don't think that's massively far from the truth in terms of people were like, "What's next, aliens? You might as well bring them out now," because we're getting hit with so much now in terms of a news cycle that's not. Remember, like the 24-hour news cycle was such a big thing. It's now a minute by minute news cycle. Seconds after something happens, a massive news story's breaking within seconds on your phone. You get an app, you get a headline, bang, citizen journalism takes over. I was talking about this with one of the last people in the calls. Citizen journalism, where someone's there with their phone and then five other people are Instagram live on a scene when something's happened. So before a news camera is even there from a multi-billion-dollar corporation, you've got 15, 20, 30 civilians with really powerful phones all filming an event. So you've got so much news thrown at you constantly that does anything surprise you anymore? And to something else you said about not being surprised and things being in plain sight, look at Jeffrey Epstein. Everyone said he's going to get killed. There's no way he's going to make it to a trial. What happens? He suicided himself. You know, Princess Diana back in the day, a little bit, couple of decades ago, just happened to crash in a very hidden away place, in the middle of a tunnel. But that tunnel's filled with security cameras. But those cameras just happened to have been turned round the other way because they were being cleaned that weekend. So again, not going into conspiracy territory. These things are more than likely being done, and like you say, right in front of us. But people just go, yeah, and
Yeah,
that's where I think people are kind of at. Where I think as a society, it probably wouldn't be the worst time in history to go there's aliens. But I wonder, thinking about it, really, and I think this is the kind of stuff I don't know how much other people think about this kind of thing. I'm sure other folks do, but the real like realisms of the UFO topic that if Biden came out tonight and said we've got UFOs are real, aliens are real, we've got craft, whatever, then does Putin come out of Ukraine tomorrow?
mm, yeah, but
That keeps happening. The world doesn't go, all right, let's all be nice now. That doesn't happen.
yeah, and this idea as well that we've somehow started to sort of master. If you know, let's say something does crash in Roswell, and we get something, and you've used this analogy. It's been used many times before. It's like an iPhone being given to cavemen, an
Mm,
iPhone that's got no battery. They have no idea what it is. They don't know how to use it, and they don't even have the power to switch it on. And if that happened in Roswell, you, you know, I quite like the idea that, yeah, that this craft or bits of this craft sort of get given, and they're like, what do we do with this? We have no idea. This is where do we put it? Stick it in Kevin's office. He's never here. Put the blinds down. We'll look at this another time. And then in 20 years' time, they look at it. Maybe they do it and they go, oh, hang on a minute. Yes, we're getting the sensor of something now. I think that is the best in which we could sort of look to sort of have on these sort of crafts. The very, very basics. Again, going back to sort of the old school stuff, the Bob Lazar stories, sports models and stuff like that. I was re-listening to some of his stuff the other day, and you you sort of get a vibe that, yeah, we really don't have a clue of what it was that he was looking at. I know Bob Lazar is sort of very old school, but um, sort of moving a little bit further forward, where we've been hearing a lot that what the future needs are sort of whistleblowers and stuff like that, and we need people that have actually sort of touched the craft or seen the crafts and things like that. And who knows, we might get it from Lou's book, but I, I always sort of go back to the Canadian ex-defense minister, Paul Hellyer,
Paul Hellier, yeah.
and he came out, and you sort of think, well, he was as close to a whistleblower as you could get, extremely high up, and he went into detail. Yeah, there are 4 species that are interacting with the Earth, and you sort of think, where was the investigation into that? Why wasn't more made of that? And I do sort of think that so much of what we want sort of to happen over the next few years, and what we were hoping was going to happen in directly after the hearings 12 months ago, has sort of happened previously. It's just either we chose to ignore it, or we just at the time just didn't think it was appropriate. And yeah, I you know I do sometimes feel um, like an old man when I sort of hear sort of some of the podcasts happening. I do sort of go back and sort of think, yeah, I can link a lot of this to older stories that you've sort of heard,
Yeah.
and yeah, that as basis. There was a report recently, and I sort of thought, yeah, that does sound like the Nazi bell. There was the rim, the writing around it, and you sort of think, yeah, no, I've heard that before. We've heard this story before. So I do think it's quite interesting how so much focus now has been on uh, the sort of, since the rebrand of the subject, so much has been focused on the future and what's going to be happening, as opposed to, yeah, the stuff that has sort of happened before that does still sort of need answering.
Well, let me ask you, Anthony, to wrap up. I've been asking everyone one of 3 questions at the end of the listener call-ins, and I'm going to pick yours for you because I think this is a good one. Where do you think the conversation's going to be in 5 years' time?
I think it's going to be on crash retrieval. I think that is what will focus people's minds. I think the stuff that's going to happen over the next year, 18 months, will be around Lou's book, James Fox's documentary, probably the op-ed as well by David Grush, and I think a lot of that will focus around crash retrievals. I think work that Leonard Stringfield and his crash retrieval work and documentation, I think that will start to be gone over by new researchers, and questions will start getting asked by that. So, yeah, to answer your question, crash retrievals.
Good answer. And listen, I've enjoyed the ramblings, the pub ramblings at 4 o'clock on a Sunday.
Thank you very much.
So, listen, you'll have to come on and ramble a bit more next time we do one of these. Thanks for coming on as well at pretty late notice, so I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
That is all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. Apple and Spotify do make a huge difference to the algorithm. If you're checking the show out on YouTube, please don't forget to like and leave a comment on here as well. Any sharing you do is very much appreciated on any social media platform. And finally, you can listen to shows ad-free and sponsor-free in their glorious full versions by subscribing for less than the price of a coffee on Apple, Spotify, just search That UFO Podcast Premium. YouTube, you can sign up and be a member, or you can do that through Patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, folks.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little Baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little grass.